during COVID, when everybody was shut down, we went into immediate, like, crazy mode.
Oh my God! Okay, it's happening. Everybody stay calm.
What's the
Everybody
procedure,
stay calm.
everyone? What's the procedure?
Stay calm!
Wait.
Everybody calm down!
Trying to help everyone maneuver through their shutdown, like laying off their employees, collecting on unemployment issues, PPP loans and things like that to help keep their businesses open or businesses running while they were closed. We were holding almost daily webinars or daily Zoom calls with all of our clients and clients that or people that were not our clients, just to tell them how to get through the weeks of them being closed.
Some of the practices, of course, had to close their doors temporarily, causing certain procedures to be postponed. Maybe only urgent or emergency care was being provided. So that's just kind of the background of the pandemic for the dental industry. So it wasn't just patient care, obviously. Financial stability was affected, and the practices that could remain open had to, pivot pretty quickly and, implement new health and safety protocols. Kind of just want to talk about, adapting to changes in the market post-COVID, what the future outlook for dental practice sales looks like post-pandemic, and how the pandemic has actually affected dental practice sales.
Welcome back to Getting Down to Business. On this special episode, we examine the impact of COVID-19 on the dental industry. Now that COVID seems to be behind us for the most part, we are talking about how dentists have adapted to changes in the market post-COVID, the future outlook for dental practice sales, and how the pandemic has affected dental practice sales in general. Be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and pick up a copy of Getting Down to Business, available on Amazon. Link is in the description. All right, now let's get down to business.
When they had the shutdown, it was a little bit different for dental practices from other types of professions, because dental practice owners were like, as soon as they learned of how this virus was transmitted through like saliva spores, that was a crazy realization for dental practice owners. There was a lot of dentists that were questioning even staying in dentistry. They said that essential businesses could stay open, and some dental practices offered emergency care, which meant that they were essential, quote unquote essential. So they did get to see some patients during that time. Some paid their staff through the whole pandemic closure. Some had to furlough their employees, and with the special rules in place with the Department of Workforce Solutions, they were able to furlough their employees, and their employees were able to collect unemployment at the federal level, allowing their employees to get like $600 a week in compensation. And some of these employees actually, that $600 a week was more than what they were making working in the practice. So it was kind of like, everybody was excited to get that money. A lot of other firms I know actually sent all of their accountants home. People were working from home. There were a lot of businesses that fired their accountants because they didn't know when they were going to be reopening, and they didn't know what the plan was. They didn't know what the nation's plan was. So they were just very unsure about how they were going to run their business after the reopen. When the governor came out and said that there's going to be a closure because of COVID-19, it was only supposed to be for a small period of time, but then she came back after that period of time had expired and extended it. So there were a lot of businesses that didn't know, like, when was this going to stop and when will they be able to go back into business. Now, once they determined that there was going to be a reopening date, our dental clients had to adhere to list, of, I want to say PPE. They didn't initially have. So there were a lot of expenses during that time to make their office to be up to code to reopen. They weren't seeing patients, and then they had all these extra expenses that they had to do to make their offices compliant with the PPE. The only practices that we really saw jump back fairly quickly from COVID-19 closure were dental practices that had dental intel attached to their dental practice management system. And what dental intel is it's a monitoring system that monitors all of your patient intake, your revenue, your treatments, your retreatments, your treatment plans, things like that. So people knew, like these people who had dental intel knew where they stood when they reopened. They were like, okay, we need to call on all of these patients and get them in, and then, schedule these patients and get them in. And they would do that. And then they would sometimes double, triple book so that they could get all these patients in that weren't seen during the closure. So those dental practices really boomerang back from being closed because of the fact that they were doing that. And they had a lot of knowledge because of that dental intel technology. Teledentistry, actually, people were seeing people via Zoom or whatever. They couldn't actually make diagnosis, but they were able to help patients if patients need to be seen in the emergency room, things like that, or they needed emergency care because of things that were going on. I don't think that really is something that's being done.
Okay.
If somebody is doing this still, that'd be wonderful to know. So costs are going up during COVID, and nobody's getting really a lot of money. So the government starts giving money to everybody via PPP loans, which is the Paycheck Protection Program. I think there was 2 rounds of that going on. There were a lot of grants that were sent out to people on the state side as well. People were applying for that. Now, our firm, because we are dental specific, we had like daily webinars for our clients and for people who were not our clients. We just invited whoever we had contact information for to log into our webinars during the shutdown to find out how they can go about applying for these so that they can have the money to continue running the practice even though they were receiving no revenue. Because some dental practices always look at days cash on hand, and some dental practices only had like 5 to 7 days cash on hand when the closure happened. So we every day helped them because legislation was literally happening every day. And Eric, God bless him, was on the forefront. He was like in the trenches, reading everything that he could about everything. And he was online every single day at the same time, telling everybody how they can go about doing this, how we can help them. I mean, from the point of even helping their employees apply for unemployment benefits, because there were so many people that were now unemployed. And we were trying to help them so that they could take advantage of being able to lay off their employees, and also not affect their tax rates the next year, because they had to let go of a lot of people. It was a very, very stressful time for us. I feel like our firm had a COVID year throughout 2020 into 2021 when we were still dealing with the Paycheck Protection Program. We still deal with it now, even now in 2024. Rachel actually has to deal with it when she does valuations on a practice, because the COVID year is still within the time frame of the amount of information that we look at when we do valuations, because we do look at 5 years. 2020 is still, this is probably the last year that it'll be involved in that. There's a huge variance in what came in and what was spent because of everything that was happening.
Like Kelly said, we do look at the COVID year because it does fall within the 5-year range that we request data for. However, a lot of times we see that, yes, the COVID year had a significant impact on the practice, but if we can justify that that impact is in fact from COVID and the practice bounced back from COVID, 2021 looks like it's back on track, 2022 looks great, 2023 we see growth, things like that, then we can actually eliminate the COVID year altogether so it doesn't have any weighting on the valuation. So don't let the fact that COVID year is in the recent past hold you up from thinking, I can't sell my practice because the COVID year is going to make the value terrible. That's not true.
People that I talk to that want valuations done, a lot of times will ask me, how come we don't just use 3 years? Why do we use 5?
Honestly, it's up to our discretion. It's professional judgment. A lot of times we want to see 5 years, whether or not we're going to use all 5 years. We want to see 5 years because that shows us the real trend in your business, right? Are you trending up? Are you trending down? Do we have growth? Does it kind of look like a roller coaster? It gives us a bigger picture. There may be reasons why we choose to use all 5 years. There may be reasons why we choose to use fewer than 5 years. For example, if your business in the last 5 years, you moved and now you're in a location that's twice the size, you're generating twice as much revenue, it's really not the same business anymore. It's the same owner and it's the same name, but you're not generating income. You don't have the same expenses as you did previously. We would argue that it would be unfair to hold maybe those first year or two before you moved against you, right? Because that was the old business. That's not the new business. So there may be reasons why we justify using fewer than 5 years, but we want to see 5 years. If you have 5 years of history, we want to see all 5 years so that we can make the best argument on your behalf. Josh, by the way, I
Yes.
recognized, but we had already started recording, that you are in the office.
You know what? Imitation is the most sincere form of flattery, so I thank you.
Yes, I put that together because I was like, that sounds fun.
That is my all-time favorite show ever.
I love that show too.
I love it so much
Um,
because there's no way you could get away with The Office nowadays. Everybody's too sensitive. Um,
oh
but I
yeah.
think it's hilarious.
Yeah, it's amazing some of those things that aired not even that long ago that probably wouldn't
Yeah.
fly nowadays.
So really, the fear is that that could possibly happen again. There could be a shutdown again in the future. Transitions from, sales and things like that it just came to a halt. Nobody wanted to buy dental practices for at least probably almost a year. It was
Yeah,
really, really a big slowdown. People who were looking to sell, there was a lot of people looking to sell. There were not a lot of people looking to buy. And the reason is because there were people who were, semi-retired, like they were going into retirement and they were kind of waiting the last minute, like, most do. And this pandemic happened and then they had to do all this PPE upgrades, and they were like, I'm almost retired. I don't want to invest all this money. I should just sell my practice to somebody. Well, it wasn't that easy because there weren't a lot of people looking to purchase during that time. So selling a dental practice was fairly hard the first year after the pandemic.
Good news is, though, dentistry isn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
You
right.
have to see the
It's
dentist
almost
in
recession
person.
proof. I mean,
Yeah.
there are things sometimes that will slow down, really dentistry is something that is needed.
For as
Um,
long as humans have teeth.
the other thing that was an issue was the financing was kind of an issue because before the pandemic and even after now post pandemic, financing isn't as easy as it was pre-pandemic. Pre-pandemic, you could be a dentist, just have DDS, DMD, whatever behind your name, and banks would throw money at you. Like you pretty much were approved just because of your name. Now, and during the pandemic, banks were being very, very cautious about lending because of, what was going on during the pandemic. But then post-pandemic, banks do have a little bit more of a rigorous qualification process that they go through with dentists. They kind of take into consideration that, what happens if there's something that like that happens again, how are they going to get paid, that kind of thing. So they really make sure now a little bit more that, the dentists have to go through a little bit more than they used to get qualified.
The dental industry is basically recovered.
I think that the safety protocols have been updated and it's safer to be in a dental office. I mean, it always has been because they have to follow a lot of OSHA guidelines. I mean, most dental practices have to follow these guidelines to the T, in order for them to be able to be open. And so most of them follow that. So probably the safest place that you can be is in a dental office. So now with all the enhancements in PPE, like some dental offices will have the air filters that won't even circulate the air. It takes the air that's inside of the operatories that you're in and it takes it outside. Think about how much more advanced dental practices are when it comes to that kind of thing, the PPE. Now that, the valuations have stabilized, and buyers and sellers are adjusting to the market and how it is right now, there's going to be, or there is more pressure on sellers to make sure that they are really pushing for patient retention and keeping patients, and also what they can do in the future to adapt to any other like future closings. Like if things happen in the future where they're closed and they have to run their practices. A lot of dental practices have more diverse services. So they offer, a lot more like Botox and things like that that are not really dental, but I mean, they kind of are because, the Botox, some of the Botox has to do with like sleep apnea and things like that, I think. And then also they're looking more at cost management, like overhead management, cost management. So managing your cost structure, and making sure that you keep your overhead low. And like we were talked about in our last podcast about increasing, like if you have a certain overhead, increasing your revenue so that your percentage of overhead stays at a steady pace so that it's not, because everything is costing more, just trying to keep that overhead kind of steady in a percentage range, that if it does increase, then increase your revenue so that that percentage still stays the same. Also, post pandemic, employees are running the show. They got that $600 a week. And then after when they came back, they were like, I want blah, blah, blah amount of money. And I want this amount of money. And so people are kind of being held hostage by their employees because employees are really dictating the market and how they're getting paid. So a lot more dental practices are offering like sign-on bonuses for hygienists and sometimes assistants, which was never heard of before. They are looking at incentive programs and bonus structures on, based on revenue, and goals and things like that. And more dental practices are investing in technology that will track things like that so that they can pay over the period of, my lifetime. Regulations have changed. Legislation, regulations, rules, laws, things have changed. Like in New Mexico, we adopted the Healthy Workplace, or what is it? The Healthy Workplace Act, where it's mandatory to give sick leave now to your employees, and this is post-pandemic. So we're still trying to maneuver through that act and what is appropriate and what isn't. We're still having to talk with dentists about, this is what the act says, this is what you need to do to stay in compliance, because there are some hefty fines if you are found in non-compliance. Colorado did the same thing. They put that in place before we did. We kind of followed suit with that. And so it's something that's going to be ever evolving.
That's something that I think could influence someone to possibly be ready to sell, or influence someone to not be ready to buy, just because of all of those changes and more time spent, in that management role and not really in the provider role, of having to constantly hire, like everyone everywhere is experiencing issues hiring and retaining employees. And not only that, but I know, Kelly, you spend a lot of time with our employees redoing their employee manual and handbook and things like that to be in compliance. And a lot of small business owners don't know how to do that, don't want to do that. That's just a giant headache that nobody really wants to take on, and that can slow you down.
And there can be some misunderstandings too about our rules. So some of the dental practices that have out-of-state accountants or out-of-state advisors that are not familiar with the New Mexico state laws and things like that, like we mentioned before, like grocery receipts tax rules that have changed over the last couple of years, implementing the Healthy Workplaces Act for New Mexico. It really is important to find somebody locally in New Mexico that has the experience, that has multiple clients that have to deal with these issues, so that you are getting the best advice and service for the money that you spend. Because it would be awful for like an employee to go fill out unemployment in New Mexico, and the unemployment office says, did you get all your your sick leave, and then say, well, no, I don't even know what that is, and then what happens is that, the business gets audited by the Department of Workforce Solutions, because they're not in compliance with that sick leave rule. It just takes one employee, and the employee may not be trying to do anything to hurt your business. They're just applying for unemployment and answering the questions as truthfully as possible.
That's why it pays to pay somebody.
Invest
I
in
mean,
your business.
some people look at their expense for like accounting and consulting and tax services, and they look at that expense and they're like, I just need somebody to do my tax returns and just file my grocery receipts tax and stuff like this. And they go to somebody in Utah or, somewhere, in Arizona or something like that. And their accountant is like, well, I can do all of that stuff for $300 a month, or something like that, and really, are they getting, they probably are getting what they're paying for. They're getting, compliance as much as the company can offer them. But really, if you want somebody that's on top of legislation, that's on top of, the rules that we have here and the laws that we have here, and that we're going to really, consult with you and talk to you about these things and tax saving strategies and things like that, that'll really help you grow in your business and in the long run pay less taxes and help you with your employees and make it a better relationship with them and things like that, then hiring somebody local like our firm, because we can do that through Bergmeyer and Associates, can really assist, you in those types of services. So two things that you should never like skim on as far as, go cheap on, when you're trying to save money on overhead expenses. One is marketing. As long as marketing is effective and you see an ROI on your investment, marketing is something that's really good for your practice because it brings in new patients. And also advisory services such as accounting and tax. Those are the two things that really should not be compromised when you're looking to cut expenses. And if it's not working, it's not working, and you need to evaluate.
But that doesn't mean you
strategy.
cut it. It means you reevaluate
Evaluate it.
what
You're doing.
what are the tools you're using. Maybe
Right.
you're not reaching your target market. Reevaluate how you're doing marketing, not necessarily cut it out altogether.
Right.
Thank you for joining us on this special episode of Getting Down to Business. How has the pandemic affected your dental practice? We'd love to hear your feedback in the comments, and if you are a dentist considering their own exit strategy, we'd love for you to visit our website and check out our resources, www.hinleybergmeyergroup.com, or you might want to schedule a consultation to start a conversation with our amazing team. We look forward to serving you and helping you get down to business in your own practice. We'll see you on the next episode.